White House trying to do to enable Mahmoud Abbas to be as effective as possible in that task? Well, that Mahmoud Abbas raised every place he went here in Washington was the security barrier, the wall that's been going up, and its relation to settlements and borders. Let's hear what President Bush had to say about that issue when he was meeting with Mahmoud Abbas.
Israel should not undertake any activity that contravenes roadmap obligations or prejudice final status negotiations with regard to Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem. Therefore, Israel must remove unauthorized outposts and stop settlement expansion. The barrier being erected by Israel as a part of its security effort must be a security rather than political barrier. And its route should take into account, consistent with security needs, its impact on Palestinians not engaged in terrorist activities.
Jay Carney, how big an issue is this wall in the negotiations, and did Mahmoud Abbas get what he wanted from President Bush in that statement about it?
I think, and I know the Palestinians were pleasantly surprised by the strength of that statement. I think it caught some people in Washington who are strong Israel supporters a little bit by surprise because of its strength, especially on settlements and on the barrier. These are important statements to make because, and with the mention of Jerusalem, which is a huge issue, because as Dawood mentioned, the way the barrier, the way these things are progressing, there is clearly an effort to make even more difficult the aspiration of the Palestinians to have East Jerusalem as their capital a reality through the course of settlement activity and the building of the barrier. And by drawing a line in the sand, at least rhetorically on that, the President made a strong statement. However, as I said in the past, there have been strong statements made on these issues, not about the barrier, but about settlement activities in the past, most notably by this President's father. And we're not, not much has changed. In fact, things have gotten worse from the Palestinian point of view in the intervening 12 years.
Dawood Kutab, what's your sense of what Mahmoud Abbas was looking for from President Bush with that statement, and how much of what he was looking for did he get?
Well, there weren't a lot of high expectations from the visit. Many expected that to be mostly a photo opportunity, so it was a pleasant surprise to hear a strong statement. The problem we have, and I think Abbas said this, is that in the end, it's what Israelis do on the ground that really matters. If that statement can be translated into a genuine Israeli freeze of settlements, then that would be fabulous. The problem is we've seen shifting, we've seen erosion of the U.S. position for years and years over the issue of settlements. It used to be illegal, then it became an obstacle to peace, and then Mrs. Albright said, let's just take a timeout. And, we've heard things going back and forth on this issue, but on the ground, the reality is the wall's still going to be built up. The Ma'ale Adumim East Jerusalem settlement looks like it's going to be built. They already put out a tender. Nothing is happening to stop the Israelis on the ground.
Amitai Etzioni, how big of an issue is the wall and the question of settlements around Jerusalem and West Bank going to be? Is that going to be the make or break part of negotiations going forward?
I think it's a mistake to lump together the settlement issue and the future of Jerusalem with what you call the wall and the President called the barrier, which some of us prefer. Much of it is actually a fence. The reason is like this. The barrier is one of the most misunderstood items in this issue. It's surprisingly close to the green line. It deviates by whatever, you can argue 7% or 8%, a quarter from the green line, which is more or less where everybody in the Middle East expects the international border to be between a Palestinian state and Israel. Now, there's nothing wrong in having a viable border between two independent states. Second, it has 96 gates, so the notion that we'll never be able to travel anymore. Second, it can be torn down in a week. So what it does, though, it did stop many of the attacks. Without that, it was inconceivable to be where we are. So I'm not saying it's beautiful. I'm not saying that it doesn't, in one or two cases, cut an Arabic village into two parts, which is very unfortunate. It should be compensated. But having a viable border is essential, and I agree with my colleague from Jordan that the issue very much going to come in Gaza. I mentioned 1 week after the Israeli withdrawal, a ship full of tanks and heavy armors and Hezbollah comes to Gaza and unloads. The whole piece wasn't going to blow up in a minute. So the question of viable borders is a much more important question than where exactly the barrier has been built.
Daoud Kutab, we have about a minute left. What's your sense of how the barrier, wall, whatever you want to call it, is going to affect the negotiations going forward?
President Bush again, made a very good statement that there should not be a border, and Alaska implied that it will be a border. Borders have to be agreed on both sides. You cannot unilaterally decide where your border is, especially if you make the borders inside somebody else's territory. So we have a big problem there. I think the bigger problem is the wall in the Jerusalem area, by including all of East Jerusalem, all inside of Israel. The Israelis have decided beforehand what the fate of East Jerusalem is. No Palestinian leader will accept that East Jerusalem is part of the state of Israel without any discussion. That's how the border is being seen, and I think it leaves very bad vibes for everybody. But it's an issue that will be dealt with a lot in the next month or so.
Well, I'm afraid that's going to have to be the last word. We're out of time for today. But I'd like to thank my guests, Jay Carney of Time Magazine, Amitai Etzioni of George Washington University, and joining us by phone from Amman, Jordan, was columnist Daoud Kutab. Before we go, I'd like to invite you to send us your questions or comments. You can reach us through our website at www.voanews.com/ontheline. For On the Line, I'm Eric Felton.